Hello, today we have the Tamil Nadu BJP chief K. Annamalai with us, who will be in conversation. Thank you so much for joining us and taking time from your busy schedule. I'll come straight to I'll jump straight to the questions. The current government, the DMK government, came into power only in May, and we're nearing the end of the year. It's been a bit more than 6 months. How would you view their performance? I do know that you said before 6 months you don't want to rate it, and you've also said, recently that the higher officials in the government have been slaved, or higher officials in the state have been slave to the government. To then combine these two, how would you view the performance, and why do you feel they've been slave to the current government?
7 months is a good enough time to understand a government's vision for the state and what they will do better than the previous government and what is will happen in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, very unfortunately, I don't see anything new that is happening in the last 7 months. And though I was very clear that first 6 months is all about settling down, we shouldn't make unnecessary comments. Now they're struggling to fulfill their poll promises. That is a big thing in Tamil Nadu now, because Tamil Nadu, as you know very well, a lot of things revolve around the promises that you gave during the polling time. So they're struggling to do it. Just yesterday, you might have seen out of the 48 lakh people who have taken gold loan from societies, the government has said 37 lakh people are not eligible. This is them telling in the election manifesto, every single person's gold loan will be waived. So all these things have got a very bad name for the government. Second, the government of Tamil Nadu, as we very well understand, there's a huge amount of debt, 5 lakh and 10,000 crore, huge amount of debt now. We are in real trouble this year, next year, and the year after. So I would say they are struggling, one, to fulfill the poll promises. Second, there is no cohesion between the group of ministers and the CM. Each minister says something. One minister will say petrol, diesel should come under GST. The other minister will give a lengthy explanation. It should not come under GST. So all those things we are seeing. And last but not the least, um, the CM is trying to do something, but I think he's being let down by his own cabinet members. This is what I can sum it up.
And why do you think he's being let down by? In which department per se do you think he's being let down by his cabinet ministers?
Oh, I can continuously tell you the law and order is a problem. The school education is a problem. The finance minister has got a very, very different ways of expressing his views. Again, that's a problem because there is no consistency in the policy they want to proclaim. And just I gave you an example a minute back. BJP and ADMK now we are asking that petrol diesel should be brought under GST. Government should take. Just yesterday, the MP, Mr. T.R. Balu, a former senior minister, has said that categorically it has to come under GST. When asked about his finance minister doesn't want it to come under GST, he said that it is his personal opinion. So I don't know, when you run a government, when you have ministers speaking in different languages, then what is the vision of the CM? We are not able to see the vision of the CM. It is all individual people making individual comments. Sure. That is what I meant by the cabinet letting down the CM.
To take it forward, are there any policies of the current government? They have announced an economic advisory council. Do you have any hopes on the budget? I mean, what policy-wise, is there anything you agree with them or you think which is promising, and what do you disagree with? I mean, you've told us what you disagree with, but do you find the EAC promising, or do you think it's not lived up to its promise as of now?
The Economic Advisory Council, what the CM has got, of course, he has got the best brains there. They want to substantiate the government vision. They want to submit a report. But I don't think after the formation of committee, nothing we have seen, no deliberation we have seen. We don't know what is this Economic Advisory Council all about. Have they submitted a report? Are they getting into detail on any other things that the state wants? I really don't know. It is on paper. Maybe one or two members individually in video conference, they met the CM. So I don't think it is right on my part to comment, because I have to wait for the vision document from the Economic Advisory Council to come out.
Do you think they should be more transparent about meetings of the EAC?
Basically, the CM's discretion, but here, as I said, many things are on paper only. Many things are on paper, but to realize that vision, I think a lot of hard work is needed, and more importantly, there has to be a vision document for the state, 2021, 22, 23, where will the state go? For example, just to clarify on this further.
They have come out with a vision of a $1 trillion by 2030, the current DMK government. So that is the...
Yeah, the problem is, the main problem with that document is it is all very political, high sounding names they have used it. but it has to be actionable, it has to be implementable. So I always look at the short
So
term
are you
vision.
saying that goal is not actionable or implementable as of now?
Not very actionable, ma'am. I'll tell you very simply why it is not actionable. Now, the finance minister, about 4 months back, he has given a long statement, the debt burden of the state. Fine, great. Now, all of us as responsible politicians are with you to have a responsible government, no doubt. Now, what have you done in the last 4 months to reduce the debt burden? At one end, we are dependent on TASMAC, which is 34,000 crore it is giving. So, what happened? The long-term vision, you can just throw around numbers and go. But what counts is short term, the numbers, what you do, and what is your action on that part. That is missing very sadly. And with respect to your question, what do I agree with the state government? Have they done anything good? Have they done anything? This thing. Now, one thing that we always complain in Tamil Nadu for a pretty long time is many of the central government schemes are represented in terms of name. They give a new name, they implement it. So now there is a welcome move from the state government in different ways to bring central government scheme in letter and spirit in a larger way. So that is something which I welcome. The last 2-3 months we are seeing. Maybe the starting point of the government was more on the fight side. Last 2-3 months is more, there is a welcome development. They want to bring central government schemes without any political this thing into it and take it to the people's doorstep. That is something which I welcome. That's a good sign. End of the day, central government scheme doesn't belong to BJP, doesn't belong to anybody. Let the scheme belong to Tamil Nadu public. Second, what do I agree is they have got good officers in a lot of good postings. They have done fairly bureaucracy, they have tightened, which we welcomed it 1-2 months back. But of late, what is happening? The political interference at the grassroots level have started. The local DMK people have started interfering with the police administration. That is why you see a lot of issues happening at the ground level. School children committing suicide. There are cases where school children got burned right behind the classroom. And no major arrest has happened. So every single case, the police is trying to do something. The political functionaries are not allowing it to function. So
So you're saying the police is not acting independently as of now.
Correct. The complaint with DMK always is they don't allow police to function independently. But having said it, they've got good officers, DGP. They've got good officers sitting across good positions. But problem is when you don't allow your political functionaries to make the police to operate independently, then everything will go for a toss. That is what we are seeing in the last 2 months.
I want to ask you the point on the central government scheme. You have said that the DMK lacks intellectual capability to come out with new schemes. Why do you think that is? And do you think then it's? But you also said it's promising that they're letting the central government schemes function. So if I could just understand, why do you think they lack an intellectual capability?
Tamil Nadu over a point of time, last 30-40 years, if we see, they are known, the bureaucracy and the politicians are known for ideating a scheme, allowing it to mature and then implementing it. So many skills, right from midday meal scheme, from Kamaraj's time, many things have happened. Now Tamil Nadu is not giving any new schemes. That is the problem. Now one end, if you look at Tamil Nadu, the state gross domestic product, we are at 22 lakh crore. To take it to the next level, I don't I don't have see any vision of the government. A new scheme with respect to creating manufacturing cluster. That is the only way Tamil Nadu can go to the next level. When all the manufacturing ability is shifting out of China, I'm not seeing it. Services, Bangalore has picked up, Karnataka has picked up, Maharashtra has picked up, we are lacking. You have Bombay, you have Pune, Karnataka has got Bangalore, Mysore. We don't see a vision here for the services sector. So it is time Tamil Nadu goes back to its old self of ideating a scheme. Maybe it could be a social welfare scheme, it could be a developmental scheme, nurturing it, allowing it to get implemented over 2-3 years. Now it has all become very short-term politics now, where you want to offer a freebie and then you want to get votes. Tamil Nadu is not that. That is the last 20 years of Tamil Nadu's history. Tamil Nadu was always known for being ahead of the center in terms of bringing in new schemes. Now it is not happening. That is what I mentioned by that line.
Sure. I want to now turn to politics a bit. You've said in earlier interviews that one, cannot rule out anything in politics. And you earlier said that even a DMK-BJP alliance cannot be ruled out. Do you still stand by that, or do you think enough has happened that that's not possible?
No. If you look at the whole statement I spoke, I said that in politics, nothing can be ruled out. And with respect to the specific question of BJP and DMK, ideologically, we have gone far apart. Our language, the way we speak, we are like North Pole and South Pole. So I don't see there is any reason for us to come together in the near future also. politics in nothing can be ruled out in the sense alliances can shift. Parties can come and join our alliance. So that is what I meant. But when you're ideological opposite like North and South Pole, I don't see, in my personal opinion, as a personal capacity, I don't see a chance for realignment.
Speaking about your alliance partner in Tamil Nadu, the AIDMK, the All India Anna Dravida Kazhagam, how strong an ally is it, and do you foresee a future, let's say, in local body polls going forward, or even the 2026 elections, where you may be contesting alone?
And there are two things. It's very pertinent to note. One, ours, though the alliance is very less in terms of years. We were 2014 we contested separately for Lok Sabha. 2019 we contested jointly. But one thing I want to point out is ADMK is pretty nationalist in terms of its theme. And many important time in the parliament, they stood with us. Article 370, Farmer Act, Ram Temple, a lot of these things, they were with us thick and thin. At the same time, BJP was also with ADMK very strongly after Madam Jayalalitha's death. So over a point of time, our alliance is becoming a natural alliance. Because though we might disagree on some points, but in terms of major principles, we are together. So that is how I see.
How strong is it right now? Because we have, we have heard people from within the AIDMK who are not in favor of it, while the top leadership may be. Some in the BJP as well as the AIDMK are not in favor of this. So at present, how does the alliance stand as of now?
At present, it's very strong. There's no doubt about it, because we want to combinedly face the DMK. And we just contested the 9 district rural body polls. Next is the urban body polls coming up. So as of now, it's a very strong alliance. People might have individual opinion. That is okay in a democracy, in a political scenario. Some members of ADMK, some members of BJP might have their individual opinion. But in terms of the people who make decisions in both sides of the party, it's a very strong alliance.
Sure. I want to ask you, the top leadership of the AIDMK has had, their equation, EPS and OPS, has always been, let's say, it's always been in the news, of some friction there. As an alliance partner, would you be willing to, or have you tried brokering any peace? Has there been any need for it in the past or even now?
One thing is very clear. If we see BJP as a party, we are in alliance with n number of parties across India. So it is not our business to interfere into other parties' activity. We never do that. Right from Jammu and Kashmir to Tamil Nadu.
But even if it's an alliance partner like this, a strong alliance partner?
Ma'am, it is there. Purely what we see is every party has seen a particular evolution, a growth. And whatever the internal issues they might have, I am sure they will sort it out amicably among themselves. And BJP is never interested to go broker, do some, maybe sit down across the table. That is not our business. We never do it also. It is purely their view, how they want to run the ADMK party.
I want to ask you about, speaking about Tamil Nadu politics and friction, Sasikala recently, during the election, she said she's taking a back foot, and now she again came and made some, comments and spoke about returning back to the political fold, specifically the AIDMK. How important a leader do you think, as someone who is from the state, is Sasikala, do you think, and do you think she would be a value addition to politics in Tamil Nadu?
Ma'am, if you ask me, any individual, provided they want to serve the state, if the intention is right, everybody is valuable. It could be Annamalai, it could be X, it could be Y. But if the question is all about whether Sasikala ji has to join ADMK and what will be that, I would purely say it is an internal party issue and they have to take a call. But for me, any personality who thinks the state priorities are important, they have to serve the public. I think everybody is important.
But as a key alliance partner, would you then advise the AIDMK, if she wanted to come back, would you then, let's say, be in favor of her joining back?
As I've said very clearly, ma'am, we don't get into other parties' business, though you might ask as a journalist, but that is our way of looking at politics per se. Sure. Because every party is different, their evolution is different, and they have a general council which has elected leaders, and they have to sit among themselves and sort it out. We never do it as a matter of policy. We never do it.
Sure. I want to speak about the BJP in Tamil Nadu. So, what is, as of now, you have finally a few MLAs in the state legislature. Going forward, what is the vision for the party in Tamil Nadu, and how do you plan on expanding? Because we've seen in the past that both the Dravidian parties have formed the government, only for with an exception of last time every alternate year. The AIDMK was in power for 10 years before that. So as a, let's say, non-Dravidian party or a national party, how do you plan on occupying the political space?
Tamil Nadu, we have seen the regional parties dominate the political spectrum here. Started with the anti-Hindi issue, agitation issue from 1965 onwards. And we have seen the language that DMK was speaking in the parliament right after independence. We have seen that. For a national party to come in, of course, we got to get our narrative right. So narrative is all about putting the Tamilians first, Tamilians front. That is very important. So BJP is doing it. Though we are a national party, our behavior is exactly like a regional party. So that is very important for Tamil Nadu politics.
Does the BJP identify itself also as the Dravidian party in Tamil Nadu then?
Yes, 100%, madam. We have identified our strong areas, weak areas. We got our strategies to grow. And we want to be a Tamil-centric party, party which has got a Tamil flavor in terms of our activity. Once we start doing it consistently, the party will grow. No doubt about that.
I want to ask you, because you're also, I mean, you said you will be act as a Tamil-centric party, but the BJP is also a national party. You know, they have a presence in across the country. How does the Tamil Nadu BJP differ from, let's say, the national party?
There's no need to differ. BJP as a party, we believe very strongly in nationalism, without any doubt. And then we believe very strongly in having a very spiritual basis into our daily politics, not religion, spiritual.
Sure.
Now, if you look at Tamil Nadu BJP, what they do is they immediately, the regional parties, they throw something as anti-NAR, BJP is an upper caste party, all these things they throw at us. Now, BJP is never that. So the number one is you got to get the narrative right, start speaking the truth, reach out the grassroots, communicate.
What is the narrative as of now for the party? You said you could reach out to the grassroots. So what would the narrative be in that sense? How are you countering that?
I have mentioned very clearly that BJP wants to move beyond Dravidian. So it is Dravidian plus. That is the word I am using it. Now,
could you repeat that? It's Dravidian?
What has happened over a point of time?
Could you repeat
I'm
that?
using a word called Dravidian plus. In the interview last week also I mentioned. Now, many people ask me, what is this Dravidian plus? Now, it's very simple. Now, the Dravidian concept has become a one-man, one-family centric, where across Tamil Nadu, there are some 14, 15 major families. For the last 3 generations, they control the DMK. Now, Dravidian plus is all about no corruption, all about development, all about taking all segments of Tamil population into the mainstream polity. So, Dravidian plus, what BJP we are trying to say, we are the only party capable of bringing any single person with talent up in the political spectrum. You need not be born in a
family. You don't think that's possible right now in the political atmosphere?
It's not possible with DMK. Can the first family leave their space to any other person from the DMK to occupy that space? Can the next DMK president can come from any other community who is not born in Gopalapuram? So BJP is the only party that can do. So when we talk about Dravidian, this is what we talk. Now, BJP is the only party which can do that. Does the DMK or any other party, can they bring any other backward class person as the chief minister? Maybe a person from a SC community, ST community as the chief minister. They can't even think. BJP can do it. So when they say that everybody is equal, every community has to progress, it is not only namesake. It is not every community is progressive. Your grandfather was an MLA, your father was an MLA, now grandson is an MLA. Tamil Nadu, there are 15 places across Tamil Nadu. The third generation person is either an MP or an MLA. Then how can they call this as a democratic, a Dravidian style of politics? And second, when they speak about Tamil Nadu, Tamil centric, now everything they do is not necessarily Tamil Nadu centric. Many things they do is anti-Tamil Nadu also. When you have a progressive legislation like NEET, through which a common normal person can get into government medical college. DMK owns the highest number of private medical colleges in Tamil Nadu.
Not just the AIDMK, even the AIDMK is against NEET. So how would you reconcile with that?
No. With respect to ADMK and DMK, it's the DMK which plays this card, very falsely. ADMK is a Tamil Nadu centric party, no doubt. There is a line of leadership, there is a section of leadership, but DMK has taken it to an extreme by terms of lies. Because DMK makes the allegation on BJP as a Brahmin party, as a North Indian party, as a Sanskrit party, all those things they keep making. BJP is a party for Brahmins, for OBCs, for SC, STs. Every segment can come in. Any person can become a state president, any person can become a minister. But DMK cannot do that. In the name of Dravidian, what they do is it has become a one family centric party. It propagates one particular community. it propagates their generation of leaders who are with Annadurai ji, who are with Kalaignar Karunanidhi ji, who are with Mr. Stalin ji, because their children have started taking over the mantle. How can you call this as a Dravidian politics?
I want to talking about Tamil Nadu. I want to talk because temples are very significant within the state. We have seen not in Uttarakhand, many temples have been removed from government control. Even in Karnataka, the chief minister has said that many government temples be removed from the state autonomy. Do you think the same should happen in the state? And how do you perceive this?
We are of the opinion, ma'am, the government doesn't have any business to manage a person's religion. It could be Hinduism, it could be Islam, it could be Christian. A government doesn't have any business to run a temple, to run a mosque, to run a church. It has to be uniform. So what has happened in Uttarakhand, what has happened in Karnataka is a far, far welcome step. And here artificially they come into temples. They have done all sorts of nonsense over the last 30, 40 years. Now the same thing should be applicable to every religion. That is what I mean. Let Velankanni church be free of government's control. Let Swami Ranganatha Swami temple be free of church temple government control. Let there be a mosque free of government control. Let everything be free. Why do you want to go into a particular temple alone and appoint government officers, administrative officers, get into the running of affairs of the temple on a long-term basis? Let every single religious place of worship be free from the government control. That is what we want. Not for one religion, but for all religions.
Across religions. You spoke about the church, and recently, coming closer because there is a BJP government in Karnataka as well. They passed an anti-conversion law in the state, and we've also seen a spate of attacks across, not just Karnataka, but across the country. How would you view these two together? The attacks on Christians and the religious. Do you think there's a religious conversion law is also required in Tamil Nadu?
There are 2-3 things, because this is slightly a nuanced question. I got to go slightly deep into what I'm trying to explain. Now, one thing I personally believe is we are a very secular country, no doubt, and the state has to maintain a distance from every single religion, no doubt. At the same time, we also have to understand every single religion should be protected the way it is, be it Hinduism, be it Christian, be it Islam. I'm a firm believer in that. If you look at the Anti-Conversion Act, it is not going to catch any Tom, Dick and Harry and throw them into prison. Now, there is a certain process they've explained. And the process.
But there have been allegations, not just for Karnataka, but that these religious conversion laws are communal in nature, is what they are not, but their practice or the implementation has been communal in nature, is what many people have been saying.
Now, one thing which I was trying to explain also, maybe I'll just continue with my answer. One thing is there is a process in place. You cannot just like that go anybody, accuse somebody. There is a process. And act by its very nature is process oriented. There is a sub-inspector, there is an inspector. You cannot just like that go and catch somebody and say you are converting people. When it is proved, when there is a documentary evidence, then there is a court of law. When there is process oriented, why should we be afraid? At the same time, we are very proud of our secular nature. India is great because of our secular nature. Let every single religion be allowed to preserve its identity. That is what the Karnataka law is doing. I don't think it is against any religion. It is not against Christians, not against any other.
My question to you is, if that we are inherently secular in nature, why is there a need for this law then?
Yeah, when the government of the land believes there is a conversion activity happening in one form or the other, they have brought a law. Now your specific question is this law against anybody? This law is not against anybody. It's a process-oriented law. When it is happening, only the law will come into practice. It is not necessarily, it will go catch anybody who's running a pastor or a church, who's somebody inside. You just cannot go and arrest them. It's a process-oriented. Why should people be afraid of this?
Do you think certain communities can be targeted through laws like these?
100% no. No community can be targeted by laws like this, because as long as the law is process oriented, which the law is, there is a court and there is a neutral arbiter and everything has to be proved. When there is a prosecutor, when there is a judge, when there is a police, why will it unfairly discriminate any other community?
Then my follow-up question is, sir, do you think Tamil Nadu also requires an anti-conversion law as well? Or do you think that's not required?
Tamil Nadu, as of now, if you ask me right now, is it needed? As of now, it is not needed. At the same time, we firmly believe after the FCRA regulations have come in, there is a huge amount of traction that has come in. The money that is coming in being monitored, it is being spent for a larger purpose. So last 2-3 years, I don't think a law is required, at least for the state of Tamil Nadu, because the FCRA and other things have contained this to a larger extent.
But you think it may be required in the future?
I don't know, ma'am. When the circumstance is right, when situations change, then probably I'll answer that question then.
I know you're very busy, so just the last few questions. Coming back to, let's say, the policy aspect of the state, coming to the education policy, the NEP, NEP, or as is also known as, many mainstream parties in the state have opposed the NEP, because of the three-language policy. Some have said that, it's against the social justice, against federalism. It gives prominence of one language to another. How do you view this? How do you view the NEP?
I would say very clearly that anybody who's opposing the NEP in Tamil Nadu hasn't read what this NEP is all about. This NEP is very clear. Up to 5th standard, the medium of education has to be in your mother tongue, which would be Tamil. Now there are schools which DMK fellows are running, the top people, where they are teaching Hindi. Tamil is not a compulsory language. Now NEP is the first progressive document in India which talks about up to 5th standard, it has to be Tamil. Second, it talks about a 3-language. You got to compulsorily learn your mother tongue, compulsorily learn English. Third language, anything optional, be it Kannada, be it Telugu, be it Malayalam, you learn it. Now, Tamil Nadu, I can show you, lot of linguistic minorities reside in the state. You go to Coimbatore, people want to learn Malayalam. You come to Hosur side, they want to learn Kannada. Chennai, they want to learn Telugu. NEP is a proper policy where all the linguistic minorities are being accommodated. Now, Sumne, just for the sake of politics, they can keep raising all this issue. Is there one word in NEP which is against the Tamil Nadu interest? There is not even one word which is against Tamil Nadu interest. Now, even the state government which uses Tamil as a weapon to get votes, they haven't made Tamil compulsory across all the education institutions in Tamil Nadu. Narendra Modi ji, BJP is the only government, party running government, which we have got making mother tongue compulsory till 5th standard. Have they done it? No. Last 17 years, 70 years, they use Tamil as a tool to get votes. Even they haven't done it in Tamil Nadu. Now, in what context is NEP wrong? I keep making this argument politically. You show me one line, one word, which is anti-Tamil Nadu. They can't show. Just because they keep opposing, because politically they want some issue to rack it up, they keep doing it.
So you don't think that it, let's say, gives prominence to, because this is what the current government has said, that it gives prominence to Sanskrit over Tamil. Do you think that is, that's a false?
Where has it given prominence? It has said, apart from your mother tongue, English is compulsory. The third language can be anything. It can be Kannada, Malayalam, Telugu, Sanskrit, Hindi. So where have they given, if you read the whole NEP document very clearly, Sanskrit, I think, if I'm right, is used only 2 times in the NEP document. Tamil is used 3 times, if you don't read the word. Without even understanding, they keep this nonsense. Maybe you can take the NEP document, you Google and see where Sanskrit is used. You Google and see where Tamil is used. You Google and see where Hindi is used. Now they are in alliance with the party called the Congress Party, which has imposed Hindi in 1965 and 1986. 2 times in national education policy, they've imposed it. Now, shamelessly, they are in alliance with the party that has tried imposing Hindi in Tamil Nadu. Now they are trying to point fingers at BJP, which has made Hindi optional, which has only made the third language a compulsory. You pick up one language. What is wrong in it?
Sure. My last question to you, sir, we've seen from 0 to 4 seats in the MLA. Do you perceive a future, or do you work towards a future where, let's say, or do you think the BJP can ever form the government or be the dominant party in Tamil Nadu?
I mean, very vocal in this, ma'am. I will repeat this again in your interview also, ma'am. We are 150 is what BJP will get in 2026. Not 1 seat less. Yes.
150.
But the next time to form a government is there, BJP will be a party of choice for everybody. Why do I mention 150? Because it is always a narrative issue. Tamil Nadu, till then, they have thrown all sorts of lies at BJP when DMK was in opposition. Every single thing was made anti-Delhi, anti-BJP, anti-Modi ji. Now everything is changed. After they have come to power in 7 months, people have made up their mind. It was only for the sake of politics they were making all this. They don't want this. After they coming to power, the first thing they want that. So narrative-wise, we are at a good space now. The Prime Minister's popularity is sky high in Tamil Nadu. Come 2026, we are looking at nothing less than 150.
Can you give us any steps implementable or any policy measures you have in mind to, let's say, increase the popularity within the state, or what you'll be working on in the new year?
We want to reach the grassroots, ma'am. We got to go to villages. We are planning to take all the schemes to every single household. We don't want to be a urban centric party. We don't want to be a party which sits in AC room and talks in big stages. The goal for us in the next 2 years is to shift the party right down to grassroots, reach
How
all
do
the
you plan
70,000.
on reaching the grassroots?
It'll happen, ma'am. Slowly, steadily, we are there. 70,000 booths. We want to set up booth committees. We want to take a scheme. We want to identify good grassroots leaders, nurture them, give them opportunities to prove themselves. We are in the process. In about 2 years, we'll be there.
Sure, sure. Sir, thank you so much for your time. I do understand you're very, very busy. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you very much. For more, stay tuned to the print.in and follow us on our social media handles, and stay tuned for more such videos.